You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the premiere episode of the third season of Lower Decks, called Grounded. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all the places, including your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest network you are sure to enjoy, called The Secrets of Stargate. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Stargate. And be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have some awesome listener feedback. We've been gathering that up, and we have a lot of great feedback to share with you, so stick around for that. But we are talking about the return of Lower Decks, one of our favorite series, of the new series in Star Trek on Paramount Plus. And so I'm very happy to see it come back. We'll see if the guys are as well. But to get started, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
Captain Fremont is about to be put on trial for destroying Pakled Planet, and it's driving Mariner crazy. Though everyone tells her to trust the Starfleet judicial system, she decides to take matters into her own hands, and she recruits Boimler, Rutherford, and Tendi to help her. Although the Cerritos' logs have been corrupted, she learns that Boimler has been re-recording the captain's logs in his own voice, and they're on his iPad up on the ship, which is in dry dock. Some space critters are in the solar system that block surface-to-space transportation, so they go to Bozeman, Montana, which is now an amusement park commemorating first contact with the Vulcans, and they steal a Phoenix ride of Zephram Cochrane's spaceship and use it to fly to the Cerritos in dry dock. There, they discover that Boimler's logs also contain his own personal comments, which are kind of embarrassing. Boimler, Rutherford, and Tendi don't think this will matter because they contain date and location stamps that still prove that the Cerritos wasn't at Pakled Planet when it blew up, but Mariner isn't convinced. She gets the other three into a shuttle and tries sending them back to Earth so that she can steal the Cerritos and go find the Klingons who produced the bomb that destroyed Pakled Planet. But the others manage to get back aboard the ship and insist on coming with her. The ship is then overrun by the space critters, which start spawning on its hull. A security ship appears and demands to know what they're doing with the Cerritos, and Tendi gets the idea to say that they're on a mission to study the spawning space critters. That's fine with the security guys, as long as they can give them the name of the officer that authorized the mission. At this point, Captain Fremont appears and explains that she authorized the mission, so Tendi and the gang are off the hook. Afterwards, Fremont explains that the trial is already over and she was acquitted. Federation investigators had established that the Pakleds accidentally blew up their own planet. They only intended to blow up their capital and then coerce the Federation into moving them to a more resource-rich world, but they accidentally blew up the whole thing. It is then pointed out to Mariner that she should have followed the advice of everyone in this episode and trusted the Starfleet justice system. But she didn't, so Captain Fremont has First Officer Ransom take charge of her. If Mariner wants to stay in Starfleet, she has to convince Ransom because he's the one who now decides whether she stays or goes. The end.
The end. So, in real time, it's been nearly a year since the end of season 2. I didn't realize that, but we've had a lot of things happen in the real world. On Paramount Plus with Star Trek, we had the Prodigy, we had Picard, we had Strange New World. So a lot, and another season of Discovery.
The Unmentionable series.
The Unmentionable. Sorry, I mentioned it. That series which must not be named, and. So it was kind of fun to come back to this after so long and to see this again and to kind of follow up on that cliffhanger of a season finale last time. So it's interesting to start with, again, our Lower Decks crew. It really, this episode, I felt like kind of epitomizes the idea of the series, which is the Lower Decks crew are getting into adventures on their own. Meanwhile, we'll learn at the end that the Star crews, the ones who are the attention getters, the captains and such, are off doing some grand adventure and taking care of things that our lower decks crew isn't going to see. So I kind of feel like this season premiere really epitomizes the ethos of this series.
Well, not just are the lower decks getting an adventure, but they're completely oblivious that there's anything going on the upper levels, so to speak.
Right.
And so they're getting into this wild goose chase, basically. Meanwhile, the real solution was being found. It had already been found by the time they had actually started their plan.
Yeah, it's interesting from a writing point of view, because in this episode, if Mariner had not done anything, we would end up in the same place and Mariner wouldn't be in the doghouse.
Yep.
So this is, you think about it from a certain point of view, and this is actually kind of dark, because Mariner causes all this chaos, and basically mommy bails her out. And then because she has caused so much chaos, she gets put in an even more precarious situation where she has to kowtow to Ransom now. And we'll see how that plays out in the rest of the season. But this is, from a certain point of view, she does not have agency here. She is not causing things to happen. She's essentially spinning her wheels. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, this is a comedy. Yeah. And so it kind of works, even though from another point of view, if this was not played for comedy, this would be a downer of an episode. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of interesting how you can look at it from both of those perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of the modern adult animation stuff that really has this sort of circular, the characters don't actually change anything. It's very like Seinfeld-y that way, where it's a show, things happen, but they end up in not actually changing all that much outside of themselves.
I suspect that they didn't know what the solution was going to be at the end of last season, that they didn't have a plan for what was going to happen in this season. And this is something they came up with that works on a comedic level, but is kind of thin from a dramatic point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you mentioned, the Captain Freeman's on trial and the rest of the crew's on shore leave. So we get some fun bits of the crew on, back in their Earth lives. We start with Mariner. She's angry. As you mentioned, she's angry to be on Earth. And she's like smashing at her dad. Like, why do they even still have the Golden Gate Bridge? No one drives anymore.
I love the fact that they hung a lantern on that, because we've been seeing San Francisco in the 23rd or 24th century for ages now, and the Golden Gate Bridge is still there, so we can recognize it, even though nobody drives cars anymore. So that's cool.
At least in Picard, they put like solar panels over the road deck, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose we still have Roman aqueducts. We keep ancient structures up, so I guess it's a historical thing. And then we have Brad, Boimler's family. He's working what at first looks like it's a vineyard. But
it is a vineyard.
It's a vineyard, but it's not a wine vineyard. It's a raisin vineyard. Of course it is.
And I love how Boimler is... In the vineyard, all the workers are female, and they're all throwing themselves at Boimler, and he's completely oblivious to it.
Yes, he is. Like he's like some sort of raisin stud of some sort, and because on board the Cerritos, he's kind of a dork, but that's apparently at the raisin vineyard, he's the man of the hour. But that was funny.
Kind of and they get progressively more open about how they're throwing themselves at him. But my favorite is the woman who comes up with two clusters of grapes, one in each hand, and she's like, "Oh, Brad, the cultivars are so confusing. Can you come to the sorting shed and explain it to me?" And he's like, "For heaven's sake, put the red in the red basket and the white in the white basket."
And I suppose, given it's the season premiere, it bears pointing out to folks that this is not really suitable for younger kids. There is some double entendres and outright stuff. Yeah, innuendo that happens throughout the episode and will be in other episodes and has happened in previous seasons. So just be aware of that, that it's there.
And some language issues too. Even with some words blanked out, they still have some words that parents might not be comfortable with their kids hearing too. So.
Yeah. Incidentally, so obviously they're parodying Boimler with Captain Picard here.
Yeah.
Because Captain Picard does have a wine vineyard. And also they may even be deliberately parodying what happened in season 2 of Picard, where you have this attempted romance between Laris and Picard, where she's not throwing herself at Picard, but she's clearly signaling openness to a relationship with Picard.
Yeah.
And so here we have Brad Boimler with his drying up grape raisin vineyard and the women are just actively throwing themselves at him.
Well, and even then Picard was clueless too, like about Laris. So, that's true. They even have some of like the hovering robot thing. So yeah, I think it's clearly they're being inspired by Picard in that case. They
even have Boimler looking like he's in the shadow, and he kind of looks like Picard with the big straw hat and the overalls. And...
That's right. And then we have Rutherford and Tendi. They're in New Orleans. They're at Cisco's restaurant. We don't see
Cisco's Creole Kitchen. Yeah.
Yep. There's a little Easter egg on the table. A little nod to fans. The hot sauce on the table is called Ketracel White Hot Sauce.
Yeah, it's 17 million Scoville units, which that's really hot.
That's super hot. We have a funny
although it doesn't bother Mariner. She's just dumping it on, but
where
bothers
gets
Boimler.
A drop.
Yeah.
His face becomes disturbingly red.
Yes. And Tendi and Rutherford talk about all the places that they've been visiting, and we have this the wonderful aspect of 24th century Earth is with transporters, you can visit any place on Earth at any time. Different, you can go to the other side of the planet the same day, and so they're trying to plan their visits to different places, and that's when what am I saying? Not Freeman. Mariner and Boimler show up at the restaurant with this plan to exonerate Captain Freeman. It requires him to get up to the Cerritos.
Yeah, by going and finding Boimler's logs. Right. Incidentally, there's another Easter egg in the restaurant. If you look carefully in the background, you'll see there's an alligator hanging from the ceiling, and that's the same alligator that was in Deep Space Nine, which Jake Sisko said his grandfather used to tell him that it's only just in stasis, not actually stuffed. That it's only just in stasis, and that he would let it out at night to guard the restaurant.
I forgot about that. That was good. So their first goal, their first plan for getting up to the Cerritos is to find an old transporter station with an encrypted transport, and to
which is a nice idea. The idea of an encrypted transporter where you have to have the right code to go through.
Right, and this recalls Star Trek, 3. When they hijack the Enterprise and Uhura has to, she's a transporter chief and she has to hijack the transporter for everyone. And so their plan is to go there, knock out the transporter chief and take over the station and beam themselves up. But then they show up and it's this sweetest old granddad.
Yeah.
Transporter chief.
Yes, and he's offering them butterscotches and and then he's like, yeah, it's such a great place and you're such nice kids. Too often I get people here try to knock me out, and that's a big mistake. So that was a lot of fun. And so they're obviously and the other thing is he has his collection of rebuilt transporters. Where he has his hobby of rebuilding old transporter modules, and that was kind of fun. And then so then the backup plan is to go to historical Bozeman, Montana, Father Cory.
Oh, and it's the transporter chief. His name is Carlton Dennis. It's he who tells them that the space critters, which are called the Verugament, they look kind of like pink slugs, but they're in space,
Yep.
and they're like streaming through the solar system. And he tells them that the Verugament, or the space critters, as I will call them, because I don't want to remember the word Verugament, are blocking surface to space transport. And so he can't get them up to the Cerritos in dry dock. And so that's when they have their fallback plan of let's go to Bozeman, which was actually one of the things Tendi was really wanting to do.
Yes.
When they were discussing their travel itinerary, she really wanted to go to Bozeman.
And if we remember from Star Trek First Contact, that's where it was Ephraim Cochrane had the first warp flight and the first contact with the Vulcans. And so it's been turned into a theme park or historical, like historical Williamsburg. And
these tourists ruining my state, I swear, taking this historical monument and turning it into a theme park. I just... No.
So
I love the idea, though, of we now have a ride that's the Phoenix. And and there's like one that leaves every 5 minutes or something. And so you get to go up and reenact the first flight of the Phoenix at Warp 1 that attracted the Vulcans' attention. Right. And captaining the ride is a hologram of Zephram Cochrane, who is voiced by James Cromwell, who was the actor that played Zephram Cochrane. And so he's like a tour guide version of himself, talking about, the journey they're doing and giving safety instructions and things like that. And then as they lift off, he does exactly what he did in Star Trek First Contact, which was suddenly remember something and pull out a disc and put it into the stereo system, and it's Steppenwolf's magic carpet ride.
That was awesome. I love that. That was so good. Go ahead.
I did have to look back. Before that, we see the grounds and you see the statue. Geordi in First Contact talking about the statue, and he's talking about you're standing right where the statue is, and you're looking to the stars, reaching up, and of course he's got his hand open. Geordi's got his hand open like he's reaching, and then you see the statue, and it's really like he's pointing. Towards the stars.
right. Slightly different.
And now we get to see everything else that Geordi saw around it.
Yep.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes. There's the bar that's never closes.
With the jukebox. Yeah.
With the jukebox that plays one song. And the attendee and Rutherford are wearing the hat that Zephram Cochrane was wearing throughout that. And so that was pretty good. Well, the Vulcan ship is now a playground for kids. Like it's got slides on.
And telling him about the statue is hard enough. I don't know that Geordi should have told him. And it's an amusement park.
Right. And so, they get on board the Ride the Phoenix replica into orbit ride, and they're going to take it over once it gets going. And then there's that one guy who joins them, like the singleton, like the guy who's visiting the park alone. He's like, well, the attendant told me to go, as a singleton, to go and sit with you guys, so I'm here. And he's like really nervous and doesn't really.
Gavin is his name.
Gavin, right. So when they end up taking it over, Gavin is like freaking out, and then by the end of it, he's like kind of lost something upstairs and has decided to take the hijacked Phoenix off on an adventure of his own, and ends up having to get rescued out by Jupiter or something like that. Oh man. So I wrote in my notes, Gavin takes over the Phoenix once they get to the Cerritos. I'm like, we'll see him again. Like he'll be back.
Oh, he says you haven't heard the last of me.
Yes.
And he got rescued by a runabout.
Right. So once on board the Cerritos,
rescued is sort of a relative term, because from their point of view, they were rescuing him. From his point of view, they were interfering with his star journey.
Exactly.
He mentions Trek, if you will, his Star Trek, if you will.
Yeah.
They don't say that, but so on board the Cerritos, Boimler gets his copies of the captain's. I love the fact that he re-records the captain's logs in his own voice as a sort of like imagining himself to be the captain sort of thing.
Or practice for being a captain or something. And
then he's not at all embarrassed by what should be embarrassing anecdotes about him, like the fact that he was on an alien planet and the atmosphere made him gassy, that he dyes his hair purple. It's not naturally purple.
He is
weird
human.
stuff like that. Yes. So that was funny. Like Mariner's like, no, you should be embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. That's fine. It's like, we can't use these. So Mariner decides to hijack the Cerritos to get that better evidence to exonerate. And
which is so the claim is that the Packleds, or that Captain Fremont, or it's really the Packleds, got a planet destroying bomb from the Klingons. And so Mariner's plan is to go find those Klingons and bring them back. And while she does have a good rapport with Klingons, there are a lot of Klingons in the galaxy. How good of a plan is go find the Klingons that built the covert planet-destroying bomb? Yeah. Is that really your best plan, or is just using the time and date and location stamps on Boimler's iPad the better plan?
Right. She's not really being rational here. So that's true. So they use the swarming reproductive cycle of the space bugs, the slugs, as cover for stealing the ship. And they take them on board, like they're all over the outside of the ship, but then they're inside the hangar. And when the security guys show up, they're in there and they said that they're helping the reproductive cycle, and it's gross and it's an innuendo about what's going on. And so, yeah, you know, too much about that, but all they're doing, so as humans, they are transporting, they're taking gametes between different space critters and facilitating their reproduction in that way. But the space critters are in instinct mode, and so it's pretty gross what the space critters are doing. But it doesn't look anything like human reproduction, which is the key point. Yeah, yes, but it's all slimy and gross, and they're getting electrocuted and zapped over and over as they're trying to claim that they're involved in a scientific experiment to security. And that's when Captain Freeman and the rest of the bridge crew show up and explain how Freeman was exonerated. Starfleet conducted a secret investigation led by Captain Bateson. You'll remember Captain Bateson, played by Kelsey Grammer in the Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise.
Cause and effect.
So he's the captain of the Enterprise C.
No.
I'm sorry. He's of the Bozeman. That's right. Yeah. He's the captain of the Bozeman, who he's from, like, at this point, I guess, I don't know, 40 years in the past,
something like that. Yeah,
something like that.
I thought it was 90 years that he was in the loop.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, he's from the past, but he's now a secret agent, and he's got other people on his team. Maybe he's part of Section 31. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Also, they found it. So the evidence that was incriminating Captain Freeman was videotape. Or video recording, and Commander Tuvok, who we get to see but not hear, so we don't get to hear Tim Russ's voice or Kelsey Grammer's voice. Commander Tuvok found the forger of the video, and he was captured in the neutral zone.
I totally want a series that features Captain Bateson and Tuvok and the Bozeman and secret missions, and that better be the Section 31 series. That's what I'm saying.
That'd be cool.
That would be awesome. Kelsey Grammer would be awesome. Make it so. Yeah. So, and that's the great part is that would normally be the Star Trek episode that we would see, or even a whole season of. Instead, it's the anecdote we get at the end of this whole episode, and that's classic Lower Decks. And as you mentioned, Freeman says, as your mother, I'm just not an objective observer. I can't keep bailing you out. You are out of control. And so now I'm going to put you in under someone else's charge who can be objective, and you need to now straighten up and fly right, or you're out of Starfleet. And that's when she puts her under the charge of Commander Ransom. And
who turns to Freeman and who turns to Mariner and says, "I'm your mama now."
Yeah. Yes, which is good.
So it's kind of obvious where they're going to go with this. She's going to chafe under under ransom, and eventually we'll come to a crisis point, and then eventually that'll get resolved. So that's a little paint by numbers.
Yeah. Although Lower Decks has subverted our expectations in the past, and they may do that again. So we'll see.
That would be nice.
Yeah. And that's the end of that episode. Father Cory, any other notes?
Well, kind of a rule of thumb, especially for things like this that are, satire or comedy, is if they have a news thing, watch the ticker.
Yeah.
So, of course, we started with a news thing. And the first one was that Admiral Jellicoe, who, of course, we remember from the episode where Picard goes undercover.
He was just a captain then.
Yeah, but he was just a captain. He was involved in the Zebulon sisters, who we heard about last season in Lower Decks, getting booted from active duty ships. We see a report of the ELDS, which probably means Earth Leak Division System, of a game between the Buffalo Solar Knights and the London Kings. And of course, London Kings was a team we heard about from DS9 that Cisco liked.
It's a baseball team. Yeah.
Baseball team.
Yeah.
We've got a Zakdorn, who's a Stratagema Grandmaster.
Yep.
He's a 6-year-old Stratagema Grandmaster. So again, lots of connections. And there's Sony Clemens, who he was on the, I just blanked on the episode now.
It's the Neutral Zone. End of season 1 of Next Generation. He's the country singer.
That's right. That's right. He's the one that was in the Frozen. He was in the cryo freeze that they rescued.
Right.
So
yeah,
had all those little things, and then just kind of a ship geekery. I think this might be the first time we actually see a shuttlecraft type number listed. People talk about, the Galileo type ships and the class 8s or the type 8s and stuff. Well, they actually show on here that the Cerritos shuttlecrafts are shuttlecraft type 6 Alpha.
6 Alpha. Yeah, that's true. Yep. Yeah, I love the little nods, the little Easter eggs to other Trek stuff. Boimler at one point says the exclamation "for Kirk's sake." For God's sake, for Kirk's sake, this is because little things like that. Fun. Also, Rutherford was wearing a sweater identical to the one worn by Jake Sisko when he was throughout the episode. So it's kind
of similar, but
he comments on it. At one point, they're talking about taking Boimler's pad and going to the court, and are like, "Are we dressed appropriately for the court?" And Rutherford says, "I don't know. My sweater could be a little more asymmetric."
It's a very 90s sweater. Awesome. Jimmy, you have any other notes?
Just a general one of so I kind of like at the end of last season. They had ended on the dramatic note of Captain Freeman being arrested, and she's going to be put on trial for destroying Pakled Planet. And that could have been the launching point for a multi-episode thing. And I was kind of hoping they would do a multi-episode thing, and they didn't. They resolved it all in the first episode. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. The advantage is now we have a regular season where we can do anything we want in the coming episodes. We don't have to, keep fleshing out this one plot. On the other hand, I kind of like the depth of longer plots. And so I'm a little disappointed, but I'm also understanding of why they did it the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
Pakleds are probably the ideal
villains for this.
Aliens for Lower Decks, I gotta say. Yeah, they are the most comedic, I think, of all of them. Ferengi are up there too, but yeah. All right, excellent. So I mentioned we have feedback, so I want to get to that now.
Sock it to us.
Sock it to you. So our first feedback comes from our episode 217 on Hide and Q, that TNG episode. Tom Grellinger writes, I wanted to add that besides the parallelism between the Naked Time in TOS and versus the Naked Now in TNG, there's a parallelism between the episodes of Charlie X and Where No Man Has Gone Before in TOS with the Hide and Q episode covered in episode 217. In all three stories, either crew members or a passenger, in the case of Charlie X, have incredible superhuman powers. I wonder if Gene Roddenberry was again borrowing from TOS to help fill out the script in the early first season of TNG. There's a decisive difference between how the Hide and Q episode is resolved. Riker chooses to give up his Q-level powers, and each beneficiary of Riker's gifts chooses to reject them. With Charlie X, he's returned to the Thasians, and in a much darker ending, Where No Man Has Gone Before, has the superhuman crew members dying on an alien planet. As I rewatched Hyde and Q in preparation for listening to your discussion, I was immediately drawn to those 2 previous TOS episodes and wondered if you saw the parallelism as well.
Well, there's certainly common elements, and Roddenberry in the first season of Next Gen was very troubled from a writing perspective, and they openly, I mean, like with The Naked Now, they openly copied from TOS. So they could certainly do it here, but at least this episode with Riker has vicious animal things. What a stupid line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say I was consciously aware of the parallelism, but it is a science fiction trope of the human getting superhuman powers or supernatural powers or something along those lines, and how does he deal with it? Ultimate power, absolute power. And so it's not surprising to see that sort of thing come up again and again. And in fact, it's probably come up several times throughout Star Trek.
It's part of Gene Roddenberry's standard anti-God thing of, and anytime someone has godlike powers or godlike control, it's bad.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right, so our next feedback comes from our episode where we discussed Arena 221. Charles Gervaisi wrote on Twitter, I think the Metron's motivation for setting up the trial by Champion was they thought humans and Gorns were savages who needed a fight, but it was better to let the 2 top guys settle their dispute by violence without bringing hundreds of followers into the fighting. Although my theory doesn't explain why the Metrons said they would then kill the losing captain's crew. It could have been a lie to motivate them to fight, but if the Metrons had thought they needed to be tricked into fighting, then the Metrons would have known they weren't savages, and so on. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think we talked about in our review of this episode that the Metrons' actions just don't make any sense. Mm-hmm. They should have gotten the information they needed from the logs of the ships that they scanned. And they should have known all about our cultures and not been surprised by us displaying the advanced trait of mercy. Yes. And just none of this. They're just, I'm glad Captain Kirk got to fight a Gorn, but the setup for it on the Metron's part is just shot full of plot holes.
Yeah. Then, and I agree with that the Metrons were a device used to get the Gorn and the captain into the same place, but were not a really well thought through device. It kind of falls apart. Then our next feedback on the same episode, Sarah Kranz wrote on Facebook, MacGyver could have built a cannon. Just saying.
Yeah.
Jack O'Neill too, from Stargate, which would be the same thing.
I love how in Children of the Gods, the pilot episode of Stargate SG-1 after the movie, she's Captain Carter at this point. Amanda Tapping. Captain Carter turns to Richard Dean Anderson and is talking about how they've been working on the technology, for the gates, and said it took us 2 years to MacGyver away to make this work.
Well, and there's also a purposeful outtake on it. There's a early episode of SG-1. I can't remember the name of it, but they're frozen in Antarctic. Actually, they ended up going in Antarctic ring and or Stargate, and there's an outtake where I'm trapped in this frozen wasteland, and we've got all these things, and I'm trapped with MacGyver, for heaven's sake. He can make a nuclear bomb out of a pen, something like that. I can't remember the exact line, but Richard Dean Anderson just looks at the camera like you can hear the crew behind laughing. It was all a setup. He just looks at the camera like, you guys are going to get it later.
Oh, man. So then on episode 222, The Magics of Megas 2, that was unintentional, by the way. The numbering was not intentional.
222
Megas 2. Brian S. on our Discord server writes, I'm rewatching The Magics of Megas 2 tonight. The last time I saw this episode would have been the early 90s, a VHS rental. McCoy has a great line right out of the gate, or turbolift. Kirk, Spock, what in the name of sanity is going on? which is typically great, over the top McCoy line.
Wait, was that he talked about movie rental.
What's a
What was
VHS?
that? On a VHS. No.
Yes.
Be quiet. Be kind. Rewind.
Yes. Be kind to your elders, too. So, and then a more general question to round things out. Paul Leone wrote on Twitter, I'm suddenly wondering how Starfleet fairly handles promotion and seniority when you have some species that live twice as long or more than the others. For example, why isn't the Admiralty entirely elderly Vulcans?
Partly because Vulcans don't view interacting with humans as or other species as the best use of their time, and they're kind of xenophobic, and so they don't participate as fully as they would. I would assume that that it's what promotion you get unless you're on a series that's actually being followed, unless you're on a ship that's actually being followed by a series, is and thus you're the perpetual ensign like Harry Kim, even though Captain Janeway could have made him a lieutenant years ago. That it's meritocratic.
Yeah.
And now we don't really see it happening as a meritocracy on screen. People are frozen into positions for years that would never happen in real life. But in principle, given their ideals, you'd think it would be meritocratic. However, part of it may be also a desire for change and give someone else the opportunity. It shouldn't be the same people all the time. Yeah. And so they may have part of their ideal may be term limits. And they may say, we want a certain amount of changeover so we don't become ossified. And as part of your personal development, you're welcome to take on this position. But then after a certain point, you're kind of expected to step back and let someone else take it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I've also seen speculation that they, understanding the different length of time that races and average live, that Vulcans purposely will stay in a certain rank longer so that it works out to kind of the same percentage. Like if your average time you're an ensign is 2 years, a Vulcan might be 5 years or something like that, where it's there's parity in that, so that you don't end up with, well, we've got 20 Vulcans in, Starfleet Command, and all of them are the high admirals because they're the ones who've outlived everybody else.
Well, if you think about it, you let Data into Starfleet, and in 300 years, he's the commander-in-chief, just based on seniority.
Yeah, there may be also political considerations. Starfleet may work kind of like a Senate, where you want to make sure we have representation of all the different Federation races, so nobody feels shut out of the military. Right. On the other hand, it has been alleged, as in Star Trek VI, that Starfleet is basically a human organization. And I've certainly seen it suggested that Starfleet is a fascist organization. And so maybe it is. And the humans just are the key people, and they've got some aliens around, some token aliens around to make themselves look broad-minded.
Well, and we do know ambition plays a part in promotion, because you had Shelby in Best of Both Worlds that was basically telling Riker off because he didn't want to leave the Enterprise. Right. She wanted his seat, basically.
Up or out. I lean toward the explanation of there's a time limit. There's a certain amount of time in service, and then after that you're expected to retire and move on to other things. I kind of like that explanation pretty well. Well, thank you everyone for your feedback. Excellent feedback. We love getting your feedback, and we'll look for more. You can send your feedback to StarTrek@sqpn.com or any of those places that I mentioned that you can communicate with us. So let's wrap things up. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Patricia R., Ron S., Ryan W., Marion M., and George U. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the episodes for us. And so that's it from us. What did you think of this first episode of the third season of Lower Decks called Grounded? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of Lower Decks called The Least Dangerous Game. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, all right, buckos, prepare for your trek amongst the stars.